Hi, good day to each and everyone. Today we will be discussing the annotation of Antonio de Morga's Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas. So, I'm Mr. Bello together with my group mates Miss Dalid and Miss De La Cruz. So, Antonio de Morga and Sucesos de Islas Filipinas. Let's find out who's more Antonio de Morga's first. So, Antonio de Morga, her, his full name is Antonio de Morga Sanchez Gray, but he was known as the Antonio de Morga. So, Antonio de Morga was a Spanish lawyer, judge, and a colonial official. He is best known for his work titled Sucesos de Islas Filipinas, which he wrote in 1609. So, Sucesos de Islas Filipinas, written and published by Antonio Morga in Mexico in 1609, and was annotated by Jose Rizal with a prologue by Dr. Ferdinand Blumentritt. So the book of Morga, Sucesos de Islas Filipinas, was based on documentary research, observation, and personal experience of Morga. So the book Sucesos de Islas Filipinas is a historical account of the Philippines during the early Spanish colonial period. It covers various aspects like Filipino society, culture, and history, and the Spanish conquest of the island. Morga's work provides insight into the indigenous people, their costume, traditions, and the interaction between the Spanish colonizer and the native inhabitants. Morga's purpose and his reason. Morga wrote that purpose for writing Sucesos was so could chronicle the deeds achieved by our Spaniards in the discovery of Filipinos islands, as well as various fortunes that they have from times in the great kingdoms among the pagan people surrounding the island. The purpose in writing the Success of the Islas Filipinas was to chronicle the deeds accomplished by the Spaniards during the discovery of the Philippine island. Morga aimed to document the various fortunes that they encountered over time, especially in the interaction with the great kingdoms and pagan people surrounding the islands. His reason for writing the book were to provide a historical records of Spanish exploration and conquest in the Philippines. By documenting these events, Morga sought to glorify the achievements of the Spanish and justify their presence in the archipelago. Additionally, he aimed to promote Spanish interests in the region and to contribute to the broader narrative of European exploration and colonization during that era.
Rizal and his reasons. What leads Rizal to do the annotations? So, as we all know, he was an earnest seeker of truth, which distinguished him as an historian. He was desperate about the Philippines' conditions when Spaniards arrived on the island. Rizal was eager to learn about the Philippines when the Spaniard arrived because he believed that knowing the country's past was essential to resolve current problems, encouraging patriotism and pushing for changes to stop colonial injustices. Next, for Jose Rizal, the country was self-sufficient and rich in economy. He was also captivated by the vibrancy and active community. Next is he argued that the Spanish conquest contributed to the downfall of the Philippines' rich culture and customs. So, when the Spanish arrived, this marked the beginning of the downfall, meaning They wanted to revise and to not introduce the Philippine history because they wanted to maintain their power and authority over the country. Therefore, they sought to manipulate historical accounts to justify their rules and suppress any narratives that could incite rebellion and undermine their control. So next is purpose of Rizal in his annotations. Annotating Morga Successus was a move from Dr. Rosa Rizal aimed to provide an opportunity to the Filipino to rediscover and restore their lost history, which includes their customs and traditions. So through his annotation of Morga's Successus, Rizal hoped to revive the Filipino people sense of cultural identity and legacy. Rizal sought also to educate his fellow Filipinos about their pre-colonial heritage and richness of their culture, ultimately empowering them to rediscover and reclaim their history, including the old customs and traditions. Next is Rizal believed that correcting misconceptions about Filipino traditions and beliefs was crucial for empowering Filipinos and also fostering a sense of national identity and pride. So Rizal also sought to give Filipinos a voice and awaken their consciousness of their past by immersing himself in Morga's point of view and writing annotations on the written document. Rizal annotation of Morga's successes. By publishing his annotated version of the Morga's Successus de las Islas Filipinas, he intended to provide the Filipino people with the history during the Spanish era and present the authenticity of the cultures and traditions of the country. He selected this book because he considered it necessary to invoke the testimony of an illustrious Spaniard who governed the destinies of the Philippines at the beginning of his new era and witnessed the last moments of our ancient nationality. So some of his annotations include different clarification and amplifications about the details, refutations of statements, and confirmation of the credibility of sources. These annotations provide some seeds of the idea of how the Filipinos should view themselves amidst a growing nationalism that eventually led to the formation of a nation. In this passage, Jose Rizal, the author of Nale Mi Tangere, expresses his intent to enlighten Filipinos about their past before delving into the depiction of the present state of the Philippines. Rizal also acknowledges his own upbringing in ignorance of Philippine history and cites the testimony of an authoritative figure, likely referring to Antonio de Morga, to provide insights into the country's ancient nationality. It also aims to correct misconceptions and evoke a sense of awareness for his fellow Filipinos. He also sees the exploration of the past as a foundation for comprehending the present and paving the way for a thoughtful study of the future. So through his novel and references to historical accounts, Rizal aims to enlighten Filipinos about their heritage and empower them to critically assess their circumstances.
Three main propositions in Rizal's new edition of Morga's Successes. First is the people of the Philippines had a culture on their own before the coming of the Spaniards. Second, Filipinos were decimated demoralized, exploited, and ruined by the Spanish colonization. And the third was the present state of the Philippines was not necessarily superior to its past. This historical essay, which includes the narration of the Philippine colonial history, punctuated as it was with incidences of agony, tensions, tragedies, and prolonged periods of suffering that many of people had been subjected to. He correctly observed that as a colony of Spain, the Philippines was depopulated, impoverished, and retarded as stunted by metamorphosis, with no confidence in her past, still without faith in her present, and without faltering hope in the future. Ferdinand Blumentritt's prologue, writing in Spanish instead of his native German language, praised Rizal's work as scholarly and well thought out. He noted that Morga's successes was so rare that the very few libraries that have it guard it with the same solicitude as if it were the treasure of the Incas. He criticized Rizal's annotations on two counts. He first observed that Rizal had committed the mistake of many modern historians who judge events in the past in the context of contemporary ideas and mores. He perceived as the overreach of Rizal's denunciations Catholicism that Rizal should confine his critique to the religious orders in the Philippines who spared no effort to suppress calls for reform. So Blumentritt became one of Rizal's closest confidants, although they met only once. However, Ferdinand Blumentritt spent most of his life in the small town of Lake Moritz, where he met Jose Rizal for the first and only time in 1887. An encounter that triggered a lifelong and deep friendship. Blumentritt, born in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, was a teacher, lecturer, and author of articles and books on the Philippines. His work includes the translation of Rizal's first book, Dolimetangere, into German, and he is well known amongst Filipinos for his close relationship with Jose Rizal. Next, annotated by Rizal appeared for the first time in the Philippines 68 years later when a publisher in Manila published the new work in 1958 to contribute his bit additional effort to honor Rizal. The present work is the sixth volume of the series of writings of Jose Rizal, which the Jose Rizal National Centennial Commission has now published in commemoration of his birth. So the book Successes narrates the history of wars, intrigues, diplomacy, and evangelization of the Philippines in a somewhat disjointed way. Modern historians, including Rizal, have noted that Morga has a definite bias and would often distort facts or even rely on invention to fit his defense of the Spanish